1945, 1946. And primarily because the history of blacks in law enforcement go back to the late 1800s, but they were never part of the real system. You know, I know you all are familiar with the National Medical Association and the National Dental Association. Well, the reason that they were started was because black doctors and dentists were not permitted to be a part of the American Medical and Dental Association, so they created their own organization. Well, it was the same in law enforcement. Believe it or not, in this country, black police officers couldn't arrest white people. And that only began to happen after 1961. Black police officers could not ride with white police officers. The cars were segregated. We were relegated to walking footbeats in our community. So in 1969, I mean, that changed a year before I went on the police department. But black officers were still walking footbeats, couldn't ride in police cars. And so the organization was established to create a national voice to challenge those very issues. Here I am, a black police officer, working, doing the kind of work that I'm doing, supposedly adhering to the same constitution, the laws of the national laws in the states, but I can't arrest white people. Well, you know, the reason was simply that black folk were only 3/5 of a human being. So somebody inferior couldn't arrest somebody who was superior. And just flat out. I would tell you that probably somewhere conservatively, 20% of the police officers, let me just put it another way, 20% of the individuals that was in the National Black Police Association believed in this mission. The rest of them were institutionalized and struggling with their institutionalization. I mean, because people do what they get paid to do. You know, they want to have a nice home and a car and all the benefits of making, you know, a reasonable salary. And then plus the culture of policing is so just unbelievably draconian. But the upside of it is that there's a strong caveat in the organization and in the other organizations who are very much active and believe in exposing these issues because they recognize that we're connected to the communities that we come from. You know, it's not by accident that there's a National Black Police Association because we're treated different. And we wanted to sort of emphasize that, but to also capitalize on it and represent our communities. The work has always been hard, and stepping down from the organization was difficult, but I'm working with some brothers here, Brother Damon Jones from New York, James Kern and Hazel Willis from Houston, Texas. Dr. Bell has been with us, people like Harry Levine. I work with the Drug Policy Alliance. You know, there was a time when we were looked at in a very kind of funny kind of way because people would say to us, you all work with Amnesty International? You know, Amnesty International is a human rights organization. Why are police officers working with human rights organizations? Because there are human rights violations in America. Not just only in Europe, in South America, but in America. We work with the ACLU. We've been working with them for years. Because the ACLU is the kind of organization that we can go to and say, look, I've seen this violation on the street. They're abusing people. Can we do something about it? And we've done that. So, again, we would like to claim that everyone is operating at that level, but the truth of the matter is that it can also be very dangerous speaking out. I don't want to forget that either, because there are times when Brother Jones, for example, he's had threats against his life because he spoke out against things that have happened in the correction department he worked in. So it's dangerous, but you know what? It's just part of the work.
That's right.
Because we have to do that. We represent the people we represent, and the only way to do that is to stand up.
To add to your question, sir, that the institution and culture of policing is racist. It has always been from the inception that Ron alluded to when the police was established to do what? To catch runaway slaves? That's the history of policing in America. And so that institution of cultural of racism exists. Now, when you ask a black person to go to the police academy, they have been trained in that same institution. And a whole bunch of them conform to that institution and to those policies and practices. And for fear of being fired or whatever?
Let me say to you all that everyone ought to read is number one. Because she took painstaking process to lay it out. But the last chapter is an important chapter for all of us who are doing this work. Because it instructs us on how to now stop what it is that we've been a part of. What was unique for me in reading the book? Michelle had gotten in touch with me earlier. I had the opportunity to meet her years ago. And then she asked me to preview the book. So I had a little preview comment. And I was sincere about it. But what has even been more profound for me is that as we talk about the progress of African Americans within the criminal justice system, and we've watched that movement, because I know correction officers, individuals who started as correction officers are now wardens. Police officers police officers are now chiefs of police. During that same period of time, they witnessed the mass incarceration of our people. In some way, what level did they have to do with what was happening? Because regardless of whether you're a police officer or police chief, you can stand in the gap. You can act as an intervention. You can stop. You can say something. Some of us didn't do that, you know. And there's some legitimate reasons why some of us didn't say. So I'm not blaming, because that's not going to get us anywhere. But there's a role that we must play. It's like living in a community, allowing negative things to come in the community and then stand by and let that happen. We don't let those kind of things happen. I grew up in a community where if you got it wrong, you got slapped around by everybody and then beat up when your mother got home. And that was good, you know, because it was a sign that we cared, that we also control the value system in our community. Let's control the value system in our criminal justice system, since it tends to be the one that impacts our life the most for people of color. We just have to stop that. We can't allow them to do that. But the other important thing that she says we must do is call people to stand in the gap again. Because if you're the warden, there's no way should we have allowed, for example, and we were talking about this yesterday, we shouldn't allow that they took education out of prison, because we know that those prisoners who got college degrees didn't come back to jail. So education ought to be available. We know that recreation ought to be available. There's nothing wrong with having a weight room in the prison. They ain't got nothing else to do. Lift weights. If that's going to stop you from coming back, there need to be television in prison. There need to be other positive, constructive things in prison. Because I tell you what, we live next door to people who've been incarcerated in our society. And people don't stay in jail forever. They get out of jail. And I want to live next door to somebody who is humane. Even if they've been to jail, I don't have a problem with that. I have some family members who've been to jail. I want them to be humane. And the only way that's going to happen is that we have to treat them humane. Going to jail should be humane. There's nothing wrong with that. We just want to punish them because they did wrong. They understand that. We're the ones who don't understand it. But that's a value that we have somehow or another come to in our society, that jail ought to be hard, but only for certain people now, because white folks don't. I don't mean no harm, but white folks ain't suffering in jail. No, not like that. Not the way we see black folks suffer.
I do think that's a wonderful statement. One of the things that I think we have to do is introduce some systematics into the process. And I believe that if you are the prosecutor and you are going to send this person away, you should be required to develop an impact statement that relates to that person and their children, so that then they have to become somewhat accountable for what is happening. And someone says, oh, well, they'll never do that. No, they won't, unless we decide that somehow or other your standard within your department is how many people you send away, but our standard as a community is how well you send them away. And so there are things that we could think about that we would require of that profession, so that maybe if they have to do too many of those impact statements, they'll figure out this is taking a lot of time. Maybe there's another way of doing this. Just a thought.
And from the prevention side, we are accountable. And I think that when we're looking at our continuum, you know, we have prevention, we have law enforcement, we have individuals that incarceration and community reentry. It is our responsibility to not forget that we're dealing with human beings. And people of color have different cultures and have a value system for their family. It is different maybe from yours as an individual, but we are responsible for one another. So being able to have things that individuals can come back with. For example, one of my concerns is that if a child cannot read by 3rd grade, the likelihood of them being incarcerated is much higher. So we provide support in those areas. We provide support for family members who are taking care of those children. And then community reentry. And it's our responsibility. It's all of our responsibility. Derek.
And let's not forget to add to your